It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
A guy who wasn't catching the rock last year was David Montgomery from the Bears. ADP of running back 25, going off the board as the 57th overall player. His rookie campaign, if you look at it on the surface, you go, wow, he almost ran for 1,000 yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, still had 35 targets, only 1 receiving touchdown. Then you look at the 11 points per game on average. That's not great. That's not going to win you fantasy championships. It's a bad O-line. He's not very elusive, although they didn't do anything to add anyone to this backfield. It's him, it's Tariq Cohen, and then they went out and added Nick Foles, who we believe is going to be the quarterback. I don't know. I've got a draft pick in Scott Fishbowl coming up soon where I may be taking one of these Bears quarterbacks because they're all gone. But if David Montgomery's not adding things in the passing game, Dwain, do I have room on my roster for a guy who's going to score me 11 points a game in a PPR? Like, I feel like I can find more value somewhere else, or am I missing the point here? Is there more to be done with Mr. Montgomery, especially if Nick Foles is there and he's playing out of a lot of shotgun, because that's where Nick Foles is best?
Yeah. David Montgomery.
You love David. I'm sending you a David Johnson jersey.
You are. David Johnson, Duke Johnson, and David Montgomery all back to back. But David Montgomery, here is, for me, he's the opposite, right, of what we've seen, with some of the other runners, that we've talked about from an efficiency standpoint. We talked about Devin Singletary, who's definitely going, too high, but his efficiency was really intriguing. David Montgomery actually had the workload last year, but his efficiency was terrible. He ranked out of the runners, Drake, with at least 100 attempts or more. He was 44 out of 50 with a grade of 64.1. So this is a guy that, and when I say grade of 64.1, that's his rushing grade from Pro Football Focus. So he was really bad. His tackles avoided per attempt, 19%, really great. But he never goes forward, only a 2% breakaway average. Okay. His average yards, his average yards after contact are okay. Played 57% of the snaps. 65% plus guy, again, you're getting in round, here I see him going round 5, round 6, and he is still young. So, those are the positive things. He's just got to be more efficient. So if we look at, what he had from a standpoint, last year, the points, everybody knows, right? It was, he basically had to have some big plays, to be able to do anything for you. But if we look at his snaps, he's in the range of where you would want to be. Okay. He does have some of these games where he drops down. Well, look at it. Why? When they're dropping back to pass 70, 89% of the time because they're losing, who's on the field? Tariq Cohen. So as much as we like David Johnson, and he actually is a decent receiver, Tariq Cohen is kind of a dip, and Tariq Cohen had a bad year last year as well, but Tariq Cohen is a guy that they want to have on the field in those situations. So notice every time, Drake, 69, 89% of team the dropbacks, 69%, 89%, snaps go down to 54 or 47%. In week 11, 12, 13, 69%, we drop down to 46%. Notice these 2 weeks here where they're dropping back to pass more, but he stays on the field. Notice these are games where they actually won. So they weren't getting blown out. So you're really looking at 2 factors here. How often are they dropping back? And, by what, how many points are they losing? Week 15 is another great example. They had to drop back to pass 71% of the time. They lost the game by 8. David Montgomery was only on the field for 43% of the snaps. So when you're an inefficient player, and then you're going to have weeks where you may only be on the field for 40, 45% of the snaps, that can create some really bad fantasy output when we come back up here to the screen above. Week 10, 11, 12, 6 points, 6 points, 5 points, 4 points, 5.5 points, 5.9. He had a lot of terrible weeks straight.
It's a bad team that's behind a lot, and he doesn't catch passes.
Now,
that's the book on David Montgomery.
Yeah, the positive, though, is they do have a defense that was really good the year before. So they could be better again. Their offense put them in some terrible situations last year with turnovers, bad field position. And so if Nick Foles, to your point, can come in and just stabilize things and just drive the bus. I hate using that term, but if he could just come in and drive the bus, it could potentially help a guy like David Johnson, stay on the field. I mean, David Montgomery stay on the field more, right? Yeah, I'm just going to say David Johnson about everybody from moving here forward. Sorry, but so if we look at his rushing attempts, this is a positive, right? He topped, the RB1, threshold of attempts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, which, is 17 carries or more. So he had an 18 carry week, a 21, a 27. But again, notice where those weeks, they coincide with a win. 21 carries in a week where they win by 10 points and only drop back to pass 52%. 27 carries in a week where they lose the game by 1, only drop back to pass 54% of the time. 20 carries in a week they win by 7 points, only drop back to pass 55%. So you need things to go right for Montgomery to get his carries. And people are used to hearing game script dependent. He's double game script dependent. If they start to drop back too much, Cohen gets on the field. If they start to trail by too much, Cohen gets on the field. If they do both things, David Montgomery essentially turns into useless. And I don't really expect that to change this year because I think Cohen is still going to be in his role. So if we look at Montgomery's routes ran per game last year, he was below the RB2 threshold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games out of the 16. And he got up into the RB2 threshold 6 times. He was never over the RB1. From a target standpoint, he got to the threshold of an RB2 or an RB1 3 times. Every other week he was below an RB2. So the positive here, and I didn't mention it before, Drake, is from a standpoint of the carries inside the 5. He does get those. He was last year inside the 5, 86% of the team rushing attempts. So that's a positive.
Do it in person at the link against the Eagles. I think he punched in 2 of them.
Yeah. So I mean, here's the thing on the David Montgomery front. If
you got it,
yes. If I got it, yeah. If the Bears can play better defense, Nick Foles can stabilize the offense. I do think that there's an opportunity, for this guy, to improve his efficiency. And we know he's going to get the work inside the end zone. So if you think about his profile as a runner, it's really the exact same. If you get rid of the other context, right, of, the defense and the offense has to be better. But if we look at a guy that's going to get likely 65% of the carries, not going to be used as much in the passing game, even though we know he can do it, and he's probably going to get over 65% of the work inside the 5, that's the same exact profile from a utilization perspective as Josh Jacobs, as Nick Chubb, as Joe Mixon, and what he did last year, and Derrick Henry. So there could be an argument that's easy to be made, right? If you can get this player at pick 57 and either A, he just gets better, becomes more efficient, and does more with his touches, B, the offense gets slightly better, or C, the defense returns to form, any one of those could give you more value for David Montgomery. If all 3 happen, there's a path where David Montgomery could surprise us, and next year we're all talking about him as being an RB2. And what I like is he's the cheapest of all these guys. And I didn't expect to be saying this, Drake, because when you look at his efficiency and stuff, it's bad. But I have to remember and remind myself, I learned lessons. When I look back to Le'Veon Bell's first year in the league, nobody wanted him, Drake. What he averaged, like 3.6 yards per carry or something. His metrics all looked bad. I just thought, he looks slow. He avoids tackles, but he can't break a big one. And so I reminded myself that with David Montgomery, when I was really thinking through this. Now, I have David Montgomery ranked pretty low, but when I think of what his floor is and what his ceiling is, I think he has a ceiling that could creep up towards a top 12 runner based on what we have here. The problem is he needs multiple things to go right. We already know that the Browns and we already know that the Raiders have good offensive lines. We don't know how good the Bears offensive line is going to be. We already know that we're expecting those offenses to be better. We don't know they're going to be better, but we feel pretty good about at least the Browns for sure. For the Bears, we still have big question marks. So there's more question marks tied to how efficient he can be. But if we're just talking utilization profile, David Montgomery is a guy that I didn't think would be on any of my teams, but he's probably going to end up on some of them. Even though I do have him ranked, lower, I do realize, what his potential upside is.
He's a guy that's a favorite of a lot of 0 RB builds. People are kind of digging him because they know they can get him after they take 3 or 4 wide receivers to start their draft.
I mean, I've got him graded ahead of Mark Ingram, ahead of Devin Singletary. I've seen Kareem Hunt get drafted in front of him. I would never do that. I've seen J.K. Dobbins get drafted ahead of David Montgomery. I see Raheem Mostert get drafted ahead of David Montgomery. That's right in the range I have him in. With the rookie runners of Cam Akers, DeAndre Swift, Raheem Mostert, that's kind of the tier I've got him in. I've got him just below, David Johnson. But when I get this discount of another, 6 picks potentially, and plus I don't see David Johnson go that late. David Johnson's usually gone in the 4th round, in the drafts that I'm at. But David Montgomery is a guy that I do see fall. And so he's a guy that I think I will own, some more. The biggest issue you have with him is he's got a hard cap on his receiving upside. Don't expect more out of his receiving, but it's priced in. It's priced in to, how late you get him.
Absolutely.